As I said before, Madam Speaker, there are 140 members of the Republican Study Committee. Many of those 141 members are new freshman members who were elected just beginning in this Congress, who are conservative members who've stepped up to the plate to preach fiscal responsibility, to keep the commitments that they made on the campaign trail. And one of those new members is my colleague and friend, Representative Hern from Oklahoma, who I yield to for the next 3 minutes.
I'd like to thank my member, and Madam Speaker, I stand with my colleagues today to stress the importance of fiscal health in our country. There's a very real problem here. If we don't address it, we are condemning our children to doom. My colleagues across the aisle like to use the 12 years left hyperbole to talk about the necessity to act on climate change, but they ignore the fiscal cliff we are standing on, a much more imminent threat to the well-being of our country and our people. Instead of addressing the debt crisis, the Democrat majority chose not to draft a budget at all this year. That tells us all we need to know about their priorities. Speaker Pelosi herself said, "Show me your budget and I'll show you your values." So, without a budget, what are the majority's values? The RSC budget addresses our deficits and aims to balance by 2025. This budget refocuses spending on our core constitutional responsibilities and limits the growth of government. 49 out of the 50 United States are required to have a balanced budget, but the federal government does not have that requirement. A budget that balances in the first and most important step towards financial well-being for our country. I spent more than 30 years as a business owner before coming to Congress. In the business world, a company will fail if they're continually spending more money than they bring in. You just can't do it. That's a foreign concept to many of my colleagues here. In fact, several people in this building believe that the best way to address our debt is to ignore its existence entirely. That's just simply ridiculous. Problems just don't disappear. They don't disappear for you or I. You have to take corrective action, and this budget does just that. The former Secretary of Defense, General James Mattis, testified that our national debt is the greatest threat to our democracy. It's rather chilling that we borrow money from our nation, from other nations, to fund things like our military, who then must protect us from the very nations that we borrow money from. We can only defend ourselves on borrowed money for so long. What happens when we run out of other people's monies? I find it interesting that Democrats only seem to care about our debt after we start putting taxpayer dollars back in people's pockets. No one is talking about the fact that Democrat proposals coming from Congress will alone cost over $100 trillion in new spending. Why aren't we holding hearings about that? This budget is the only budget put forward in the House so far. It deserves our attention and our consideration because we're the only ones trying to right the ship. Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.